The word educator comes from the root ductus, which means lead, the prefix e, which means out, the suffix ate, which means the act of, and the suffix or, which means one who does. An educator is one who ought to be, who must be, in the act of leading people out of ignorance, and that's what I do. All the time we're doing that, we're spreading, we talk about spreading our Christianity. And I think, oh, we wouldn't allow Jesus into Osage, Iowa. That funny man with the long hair and wearing those funny sandals and a skirt? No, we're not going to allow him in.
This is how I found out about you.
Oh, dear.
And
mentors?
Mentors, yes, growing up.
I had the most sane, rational, moral, not exactly Christian, but Christian, convinced Christian, but just a good human being for a father. And I turn into a soup sandwich every time I talk about him, because he was absolutely remarkable. Had 7 children, lost 1, and raised the rest of us on scrub land in northeast Iowa, on 160 acres of land, and said to us, if you're ever going to lie, don't lie to me. And said to us, get out and get an education. What you put in your head, they can't take away from you. He never went to college. Got married when he was 18. And he was the best example of a human being that I've ever known.
That's great.
It was, I can't imagine a better father.
Mm-hmm.
It's not, it isn't possible.
So what was it, what did he do? What did he instill in you? Is that where you got your strength from?
You know, that's
your
where you got your
motivation?
strength. That's where you got your commitment.
Mm-hmm.
That's where you got your honesty. That's where you got your ambition. That's where you got your compassion. That's where you got your realization that he would say every time you turned around, you don't judge a book by its cover, goddammit. And he lived by that. And watched me become what I became, and didn't really understand what that was all about until I showed him the film of the blue-eyed, brown-eyed film. The first one was made in my classroom. The first year, we did the exercise in April, and then that September, I had a new group of 3rd graders, and I did the exercise with them in October.
Mm-hmm.
The Canadian Broadcasting Corporation filmed it. They sent me a copy of the film. I took it up to the hotel where my folks lived. We owned the hotel. And I showed it to my mother and my father. And when it was over, he stood up and he took his red handkerchief out of the back pocket of his blue bib overalls,
Mm-hmm.
and he wiped his nose, he wiped his eyes, and he blew his nose, and he said, I wish somebody had taught me that when I was 9 years old. I hadn't seen him cry since my little sister died in our house. Absolutely, the gem of his life was that little girl, and she died in front of, there I was. And I never saw him cry after that until he saw that film.
Mm.
And then he was absolutely sold on what those kids learned. He wished somebody had taught him that when he was 9 years old.
Yeah.
And I do too.
Especially in the Midwest. So I grew up in Minnesota, and there's a lot of that kind of behavior.
Yeah.
You don't see a lot of dark-skinned people where I grew up in northern Minnesota by Fargo. And so I think that's what stuck in my brain is I saw your video when I was a kid, in my 20s, and I'm like, wow, nobody did that in my high school.
Yeah. Well, and in Minnesota and in
Yeah.
Iowa,
Right.
the first thing they'll say when you say we're going to talk about racism, and I've been to Minnesota and I've had them say this to me,
Mm-hmm.
we don't have any racism here, we don't have any N-words. Because obviously, if you don't have any of those people, you can't have any racism.
Mm-hmm.
And that in itself is one of the most racist statements you can make. And that's the one I've heard most often, particularly in Iowa and Minnesota, when I say we're going to talk about, we don't have that problem here, we don't have any of those people here. Okay, in other words, if you don't have any of those, you don't have any racism.
Mm-hmm. Right.
If that were true, wouldn't it be nice?
Right.
It's not true.
So how do you teach people like that the difference between, because there is a stark difference. I'm white, and this person may be black.
Well, now look at my shirt.
Mm-hmm.
Can you see where it stops and my skin begins?
Right.
What color's my shirt?
White.
What color's my skin?
White.
No, it isn't. Take another look.
What color is it?
My skin is not white. My skin is a shade of tan. Every human being on the face of the earth has skin that is a shade of tan or darker than tan. There are no white people on this earth. That is a word that was used during the Spanish Inquisition because it meant purity and goodness. And the people who were going to be the rulers were those who were white. They weren't white then and they aren't white now. There is no such animal on the face of the earth. If you know a white person, you know somebody who's dead. Because when you die, if you're lying down, your bodily fluids sink to the back because of the force of gravity, and that's part of what gives your skin its color.
Correct.
Your melanin doesn't matter anymore.
But have you ever seen a true racist? And have you seen people that
seen a true racist? Oh my God!
describe to me your reaction to people who are more blatant about racism.
Who are what?
Who have blatant racism. How do you react to
All
that?
I have to do is walk into a restaurant where they recognize me. And it is like they might as well be wearing signs that say I hate blacks. It is just, there are places where I won't eat unless there is a buffet, because I know that they'll spit in my food. There's no doubt in my mind but what there are places in Northeast Iowa where I better be sure I go to the buffet. It is after you've been called all the names often enough, and after you've been threatened with death, and after you've been, a white male has hit me, we are surrounded by racists. If we aren't, explain to me how Donosaurus T. Rump got elected. No non-racist stands up in front of the world and says, there are good people on both sides in that march. And where? In Charleston? Good people on both sides. No, there weren't good people on both sides. There were neo-Nazis, and there were people who weren't neo-Nazis. Neo-Nazis are not good people, make no mistake about this. And if you haven't read the book, When at Times the Mob, now wait, let me think. When at Times, look at this book. And then just listen to one page of it. Ever since this fool got elected, I've been thinking, this feels like Hitler. This feels like Nazi Germany. There's something very wrong here. Donald Trump should have... We know from Ivana Trump's now sealed testimony at Trump's first divorce trial, backed up by her lawyer, Michael Kennedy, and from the president himself, that for years a younger Donald Trump slept with a book of Adolf Hitler's collected political speeches published in 1941 as My New Order in a locked cabinet at his bedside. Ugly and appalling as they are, those speeches are masterpieces of demagogic manipulation. Now, people my age who watched what happened in Nazi Germany, I was born the same year that Hitler and Franklin Roosevelt came to power. Mm-hmm. So from the time I was 3 years old, I heard my father infuriated by what was going on in Europe because of what the Nazis were doing. Now, I wake up in the morning and I think, what will he do to amuse them today? And I think he reached the lowest point you can reach when he gave that fool the President's Medal of Freedom.
Oh, Rush Limbaugh.
Rush Limbaugh. And Rush Limbaugh first said, oh, thank you, and then he did this. And then he pulled it back quickly. That was the single most important gesture that was made during that whole event. People need to realize what Rush Limbaugh was trying to keep from telling us. And for a man to give Rush Limbaugh the President's Medal of Freedom, evidently the way he spells freedom is Freedumb. I am infuriated by that, and I'm infuriated by the fact that people didn't come out of the woodwork to condemn him for doing that. After what that man has said about the LGBTQ plus people, about blacks, about Hispanics, about Asians, about Muslims, and he gets the President's Medal of Freedom. That should tell us all something.
So the town that I grew up in, it's a very small town, has 1,800 people in Minnesota. Out of the 1,800 people, we have probably half the town is Muslim, Somalian. And so it's very strange. A lot of people moved away. And so I'm wondering, do you think it has something, the racism or the, whatever you want to call it, does it have something to do with religion at all? And what are your feelings on religion? Why would people move away from another human being?
Because they're scared.
Okay.
Because they're afraid it will rub off on them. Because they don't understand Islam. Because they believe what our present president is saying about Islam. Because there are some Islamic people who do things that we as Christians absolutely protest, while we do it to other people. You cannot criticize what the Muslims do to one another or to other people while you're keeping the First Nations, the Indigenous people, on reservations and stealing their land. We can criticize what other religions do because we are Christians, and we can ignore the part of the rules that says, do not judge one another. Judge not, lest ye be not judged. Mm-hmm. We can ignore the part of our Christian faith that says we all belong to the family of man. Totally ignore that. We can deny the place in the Bible where it says that Jesus had feet of bronze and kinky woolly hair. We can deny that because we only believe the parts of the Bible that make us comfortable. And we can deny the fact that racism based on skin color didn't start until about the 1600s. That started as a result of the Spanish Inquisition. It had nothing to do with anything except Torquemada and company killing off people to turn them into Christians. And he found out that several thousand of the people he had killed were Christians. And he realized that you can't always tell what a person's religion is by looking at them, so he had to find a way to define those he could kill, and he had to have an easy way to define them. So he set upon skin color. It has nothing to do with having started with Jesus Christ. This business with the rightness of whiteness has only been around for between 500 and 600 years. And if you don't believe that, then you need to get the book The Myth of Race by Robert Wald Sussman. Read that book, and you'll find out that we have been, the myth of race isn't a myth, it's a lie. It's a flat out lie to give one group power over everybody else and to use religion. Have you seen pictures of Jesus hanging on the cross? Does he have feet of bronze and kinky woolly hair? Well, then that isn't the Jesus that's talked about in the Bible, is it? We wouldn't let the Jesus that's talked about in the Bible into most of our Christian churches. Right. Because he would say, can't lie, can't cheat, you can't steal, you can't do these things if you're a good Christian. Christianity is tough. Yeah, it is. We don't really want to be Christian. Right. I was raised in a home where my mother was a careless Catholic, mm-hmm. and my father was a believing Baptist. But he believed that you could pray without being in church. And he did. And she didn't. It was an interesting upbringing. Yeah. You had to decide what you believed, and then you had to decide why you believed it, and then you had to prove to yourself, not to the rest of the world, but to yourself that what you were doing was right. Right. And when my father said to me, I wish somebody had taught me that when I was 9 years old, that gave me ammunition for the rest of my life. When people say, you did a terrible thing to those children, I think of my father. Mm.
And what he said?
And he was a moral man, and he was right. And those kids who have been through that exercise say to this day, mm-hmm. it's the best thing that ever happened to them. It's the best thing they ever learned.
Did you have any African Americans in your elementary classes, like when you were a kid or high school?
Well, at that time I would say we're all African Americans.
Yeah.
Because we all came from the same ancestor.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no, and now science has proven that. There's no doubt about it anymore, so now it's time to stop talking as if we're a different race. There's only one race on the face of the earth of people.
And how do you, it's so difficult to do that nowadays, because there are, like when you fill out a job application, what are you? White?
I put human. I won't put, if they want a color, I say
Yeah.
put a color. I'm not putting a color on here.
It's kinda
I would
strange,
put,
yeah.
I put human if it asks for race, and if it asks for a color, I'm going to put either speckled or tan. Because that's what I am. Get over it, people. If I know they need to know what my color is because of the way they allot their funds. I know that. So if they want to know what my color is, I'll tell them what my color is. But that's not what my race is. I'm a member of the human race, and so are you. And because we both have the same ancestor back there 300,000 to 500,000 years ago, you and I are 30th to 50th cousins.
Yes.
Period.
Right.
So, and when I do a college campus, I stand on the stage and hear all these different people down there. I say, now, have the white race stand, they do, black race stand, brown race, yellow race, red race, once they're all up, I say, now, will every person who considers himself or herself a member of the human race, please sit down. And there's an audible gasp, and they all look at each other, and then they sit down, and then they start to talk to each other. And it's like, you know, what have we done? What did she just, what's she trying to do? And they know what I'm trying to do. I'm an educator. The word educator comes from the root ductus, which means lead, the prefix e, which means out, the suffix ate, which means the act of, and the suffix or, which means one who does. An educator is one who ought to be, who must be, in the act of leading people out of ignorance, and that's what I do.
When did you decide to be a teacher, actually? And
What?
why? When did you decide to be a teacher, and why?
When did I decide to be an educator? When my father told me he wouldn't help me go through nurses training. He said, if you want to be a teacher, I'll help you with that. And he didn't have any money, he couldn't help me anyway. But he would support me in every way if I wanted to be a teacher, because my two older sisters were both teachers, and his sister was a teacher. He wanted me to be a teacher, so I had planned to go to take nurses training in Des Moines. He wouldn't help me do that, so I became a teacher. Probably the smartest thing he ever said to me, the best thing I ever did.
So how did it affect you?
Oh, God. Oh, God. Oh. If I never had to think about that again, life would be easier. And I don't know how young black women stand it. He was our hero of the month in February in 3rd grade because of what he was trying to do, which was bring us together. It wasn't all about black people, it was about human beings. And our lesson plan for the next day was to learn the Sioux Indian prayer that says, "O Great Spirit, keep me from ever judging a man until I've walked a mile in his moccasins." I was taking the teepee home that my previous year's 3rd graders had made. We were going to put it up in the classroom the next day. I had to wash it, dry it, and iron it. We were going to put it up in the classroom the next day, paint it with Indian symbols chosen by white folks, sing Indian songs written by white folks, read Indian poetry written by white folks, and learn about Indians. Wasn't going to happen, but that's what we were going to do. I walked into my house, the phone was ringing, picked up the phone, and it was my sister who lived across the block. She said, "Is your television on?" I said, "No." She said, "You better turn it on." I said, "Why?" She said, "Because they shot him." I said, "Who'd they shoot this time?" Because we'd been through a series of murders. And she said, "Martin Luther King Jr." And for an instant, the world stopped. He represented, I can remember it as clearly as if it happened 5 minutes ago. He represented hope to me. And we don't have hope in this country now. We destroyed hope.
Who did?
We did. This country did. These people, we melanin-challenged people who are running this show, that the indigenous people called palefaces, we did that. We destroyed Martin Luther King Jr. out of our sheer ignorance. And we have promoted somebody who wouldn't be fit to wipe his shoes to the position of in the highest office in the land. Now, he didn't get there by himself. We put him there. And we, this society, killed Martin Luther King Jr. And every time I give a speech, I say to those 3 college boys, those 3 fraternity boys down in the second or third row who are with the red caps on, that say, "Make America hate again." It says "Make America great again," but it means "Make America hate again." Take us back to the 50s, which were great for white men, not worth a damn for the rest of us. Erase that progress that we've made since the 50s and take us back to that ignorance. We talked ourselves into getting out of Christianity.
When and who?
We, the general public in this country,
Many years ago?
started many years ago, but has accelerated with the evangelical group. And if you don't know anything about the evangelical group, you'd better get some of Frank Schaeffer's books, because Frank Schaeffer's father started the evangelical movement in the UK. He taught it to his son. Franklin Schaeffer taught evangelical principles to his son Frank and brought it in his country. And now Frank Schaeffer says, stay away from the evangelical movement. It has been so twisted in this country that it is unrecognizable. And if you read his books, you realize exactly what he's talking about. It's absolutely terrifying. And Mr. Dinosaurus T. Rump has the backing of the evangelicals.
Is there anything good that Donald Trump has done? Can you give him a little bit of credit for anything that he's done as president? Even if you don't like him as a person.
I think that he has managed to perpetuate the economic policy started by Barack Obama. At the same time that he denies that Barack Obama ever did anything worthwhile. Oh no, he isn't loyal to anything or anyone. And if you think he is, look at his marriages. No, it has nothing to do with being loyal to the Republican Party. It has to do with finding the people who are most likely to support his ignorance and his greed. That's what he found. That's what he's got. And he's got the Koch brothers' brother now behind him, and he's got a lot of support from people who have a lot of money.
Let's talk about inner cities, just some of the major, most populous cities in the United States. What is going on? I know in the 60s there was like a movement.
Let me show you. Let me show you.
Okay, let's do it.
Write our laws. Okay. Who writes them? How they get passed, and what they are meant to do. If you haven't read this book, for God's sake, get it and read it, because it is going to. If you just read this page. Everybody has to read this book. I thought, well, black people just want to live alone. That's the reason we have black inner cities. We have black inner cities because the people who are writing the laws have made what we have called de facto segregation isn't. It's de jure segregation. It is segregation that is started by and for and about our legal system. Right. It is absolutely terrifying when you realize, for instance, if churches, universities, and hospitals had faced loss of tax-exempt status for their promotion of restrictive covenants, they most likely would have refrained from such activity. The people who write the laws are just as ignorant as the rest of us are where race is concerned. They, too, over the last 500 years, have been taught that there are 4 or 5 different races, and the whiter you are, the brighter you are. They write laws because they are ignorant. They don't know any better. I honestly believe they don't know any better. And until you... And it isn't just the politicians. It's the teachers.
Yeah.
And the preachers. And the store owners, and the bus driver, and the civil engineers. And I have 2 brothers who are uncivil engineers. And they, too, believe in the myth of race. They absolutely believe it. So here I am. I have 2 half Saudi Arabian and half Anglo-American granddaughters. They go, Muslims. And I'm laughing and thinking, oh, my friends, my brothers, give me a break. I now have a grandson who is married to a black girl, a black woman. She's brilliant. She's absolutely delightful. I have a granddaughter who has adopted a child because she has MS and can't have children. She has adopted a child who is absolutely the most gorgeous thing I've ever seen in my life, and he's half Hispanic. And I'm thinking, here we are. We are going to be, and we are now, a family that represents what the world is going to look like. It already does, but pretty soon the United States is going to look like my family. It's going to become the family of man. And we are going to be people who support one another as they are, not as we wish they could be. I'm just, I look at those beautiful people who aren't white, and I think, how did we get so lucky?
Well, so one thing I want to talk about is I think there's a stat out there where it says 23 million black babies have been aborted over the past several decades. Typically African Americans who maybe who are poverty stricken, they set up, these abortion clinics all over the U.S. And it's sad because we're not really preaching that life is important. How do you feel about that?
Let me tell you how that came about.
Okay.
I've been around too long, and that's what many people will say. Get her out of here. It's too late, folks.
Ben Wattenberg, okay?
Wrote a book called The Birth Dearth. Birthdearth. And the first one he wrote in 1987, and this is a man who's a member of the American Enterprise Institute and gave advice to President of the United States. The first paragraph of the first chapter of the first book he wrote said, the main problem confronting the United States today is there aren't enough white babies being born in this country today. If we do not do something about it, and do it soon, white people will lose their numerical majority in this country, and this will no longer be a white man's land. At that time, in 1987, 60% of the fetuses that are aborted every year were white. He got hold of presidents, and he started spreading the message. I read his book, and in the back of his book, there were responses to that message, really angry responses. So then, he rewrote the book and put a whole lot of charts and tables and graphs to prove what he was saying without saying it right out in front. Benjamin Disraeli said there are three kinds of lies. Lies, damn lies, and statistics. His second book is full of statistics to prove that we need to do something about the low rate of white births in this country. I did a speech at some college a year ago, and there were those two young men sitting down there, and one of them raised his hand and said, Miss Ellis, you've got your statistics wrong. I said, what are you talking about? He said, you're wrong about your statistics. I said, we'll go down, after I get done with what I'm doing here, you and I will have a visit about that. So we went downstairs, and he said, you said that 60% of the fetuses that are aborted in this country today are white. I said, I did not. I said that 60% of the fetuses that were aborted in 1987 were white. He said, well, now, you're wrong about that, because the last statistics are 39% of the fetuses that are aborted in this country are white. I said, you just proved my point. He said, what do you mean? I said, think about it. Before Ben Wattenberg's book, before we started doing away with Planned Parenthood clinics, before we decided to keep those brown-skinned people out of this country because they reproduce too rapidly, 60% were white. Now they're down to 39%. We're making progress, aren't we? His face was he couldn't take it in. He was just shocked. Number one, that I knew anything. Number two, that I had disagreed with him. Number three, that he was flat out wrong, and I had the statistics to prove it. You can't get a copy of that first book. I'm trying to get that book. I want to get my hands. I loaned mine. Somebody took it, and I haven't gotten it back. I've got that book somewhere. I can get a copy of it for $700. I'm very much tempted to buy the book so that I will have it to say to people, don't tell me that I don't know what I'm talking about in this area. The reason this man is shutting down Planned Parenthood clinics is so that he will see to it that abortions are not discussed with white women in Planned Parenthood clinics. And if you think this wall on the southern border is for any reason other than to keep out brown-skinned people, you need to take another look. Because he has said repeatedly, brown-skinned people reproduce too rapidly.
Isn't that what it's called, R&K selection? I've heard of that before. Have you heard of that before?
No. The reason our birth rate among white women is down is because of the women's movement. Women are told they're better. They're better than that. That there are other things we can do with our lives, and there are other things we can do with our lives, but we can do them too. I had 4 children in 5 years. Then we found out what was causing that. I was very busy. I'm real busy, and I got real busy, and I'm glad I had those 4 children. I wanted a dozen. Found out we couldn't support more than 4.
Right.
And then I went back to work so that we could support the 4. But a whole lot of women today, families today have to have 2 jobs in order to support a family. And if you've got more than 2 children, you're in trouble because of the expense of raising a family today. It's
Right.
ridiculous. It ought to be easier. But it's but I believe you can be a mother and a wife and an employee at the same time, because if you can't, what have I been doing for the last 52 years?
Right.
Come on, people.
Right, I know.
Get over it.
Here's my thing too with like mothers nowadays, and I'm gonna sound maybe ignorant right now, but everybody's posting like when a new mom becomes a mom nowadays, they gotta tell the world about it. They gotta show their breasts out, breastfeeding, and they gotta show everybody that they can be a mom. And it's like 50, 60 years ago, women just did it. They didn't complain about it. They didn't show the world.
Look what I did.
Like, people have been doing it hundreds of years.
I was raised on a farm. Cows do it all the time. Hogs do it. Chickens do it.
Yes.
It's not that big a deal,
Right.
people.
Just do it.
You can produce one, but then can you raise them?
Exactly.
And if you're going to raise them to believe that they're better than somebody who has darker skin, you ought not to have any. It's that simple. If you want to make the world a more civilized place in which to live, then you'd better start educating the mothers and the grandmothers and the fathers of the children who are of the future, and telling them all these people in this community are cousins of one another, 30th to 50th cousins, and I will not tolerate some of my lighter skinned cousins abusing my darker skinned cousins because of my lighter skinned cousins' ignorance about racism.
Yeah.
We have inner cities in this country because we put people of color, we are ghettoizing. We have been ghettoizing people of color in this country for 300 years. I think it's time to stop it. And it wasn't their choice. They couldn't live where they wanted to. They lived where we told them to. And if you think I'm lying about that, then you go to any Native American reservation on this continent.
That is very strange because I lived like 2 hours from one of those, a reservation, and it's very strange,
You cage animals.
Yeah, it's like
Davy Crockett's famous. Daniel Boone's famous because they killed dark-skinned people. Isn't that a great thing to be proud of? No, it's not. This is ridiculous.
But how do you teach kids, though, because we do have a history, even though it's a bad history sometimes for, a darker-skinned person. How do you teach a child nowadays about history?
You teach them the reality instead of the lie. You don't teach them the fiction. You teach them that Columbus didn't discover America. You can't discover a place where people are already living. They discovered it before you got there. And you teach them that. You get the... I don't have it here because my grandson borrowed that one too. No, I'll show you. You have to have this magazine.
Okay.
I'll get it. I know it's right.
So this is the book this is a magazine she's referring to here. That's the map. Okay, and we have this here.
These are, every person's skin has a color on the color wheel. And all you have to do is go find the color wheel and then find your color on the color wheel. These are all members of the human race, all members of the same race. A color wheel of humanity. And I say to people, groups, look, folks, get on the color wheel and find out what your number is on the color wheel. And just put that beside your name instead of BS, BA, or MS, or PhD. And then somebody will say, I don't want to be a color. Do you pay into Social Security? Well, yes, then you're a number. I don't want to be a number. You're paying into Social Security, you're a number. Well, that's different. It's no different at all. It's just I have a number. I have a Social Security number. Make no mistake about that. I could have a color wheel number. And so could every one of us.
These are Pantone number
Yes,
colors. Too.
that's right. That's
we could
right.
be a Pantone.
Yes,
See?
yes. Isn't that remarkable? See, I want this blown up as like what we do with the Mercator projection map. We've got it all over the building, all over the side of the wall, all over, a wall-size map. Mm-hmm. Every college and university has a Mercator map somewhere, wall size. And then if you read the legend at the bottom of the map, it says South, which you, I'm sure, saw when you were in school. Now, if you go to a school today, you will see it again. Because this little bit of misinformation is used throughout the United States to teach about the size, the shape, and the location of all the important land masses on the face of the earth. And you know which ones they are. And this is what it looks like when it's hanging on the wall.
That looks very familiar, indeed.
Of course, yeah, it does, doesn't it? Now, you'll notice that there's a Russia and a Russia. There's a China and another China. There's an India and another India. They have to do it that way in order to have the United States in the middle of the map.
Right.
In order to use this map at all, you have to take this piece off here, and put it over here. And now you see, the United States is no longer in the middle of the map.
Right.
Now, I did this with a major record company in New York City, I think in 1970. And an older man stood up in the back of the room and said, "Now, Elliott, you've gone too far." I said, "What's your problem?" You can't do that with the map." I said, "Well, actually you can." He said, "No, the United States isn't in the middle of the map anymore." I said, "The United States never was in the middle of the map. You need to realize this depends on how you draw your map." And then I pointed this little fact out to him. South America is actually 9 times larger than Greenland.
Even though it doesn't really look like it.
No, it is. South America is actually 9 times larger than Greenland.
It's crazy.
Now, according to your social studies teachers, what is the equator? Halfway between the North Pole and the South Pole,
yeah,
right?
the world.
Halfway between the North Pole and the South Pole on this map would be right about here.
Right.
And that means that Iowa has a semi-tropical climate. Well, you've been in Minnesota in the
I've
wintertime.
been in Iowa too. It's definitely
You know that it doesn't have a tropical climate. So you have to then introduce a real version of the map of the world. That's what this is doing. This is
That looks very good.
the Peters projection map. The sizes on this map are right. The shapes are distorted.
Wow.
Look at Greenland on this map. Right there. See it?
Yeah, it's really tiny.
See how small that is?
Right.
Look at it on the Mercator projection.
So why do they do that? I don't understand.
Why? Because the Pope commissioned Mercator to make a map that shows the spread of Christianity. So all the countries in which there are predominantly white people are larger than those in the southern part of the world.
That's crazy.
It's not only crazy, that's not crazy. The
That's what
crazy
they
part
teach
is
us.
that we've been using it
For years.
for 400 years. This was done in 1600s, I think. Look at the difference in these two maps. Look at the size of halfway between the North Pole and South Pole.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you have children going to school and they're seeing this map,
Right.
they're seeing a distortion
Yeah.
of size, of shape, of location, of importance. If they're looking at this map, they're seeing a distorted, shape distorted, but size and location and importance makes sense. This makes no sense. However, Dinosaurus T. Rump really believes this map because this is the reason he wants to buy Greenland. A couple months ago, he decided he'd buy Greenland. He thinks it's that big. He doesn't know that it's this little teeny tiny thing right here.
Right.
On that map, Alaska is bigger than Mexico. On this map, Mexico is bigger than Alaska. And look at Canada on this map. Look at that thing. That much of the map. Look at Canada on a properly constructed map.
Yeah.
Do you think that's important?
It's like a world of difference, actually.
A world of difference. That's a good thought. Look at there. Look at South America and compare it to Greenland on this map.
Right. It's almost like we're teaching kids that we're bigger, we're better.
That's right.
You know.
That's right. That's exactly what this map is supposed to do.
Right.
What we have in this country and call education is indoctrination. We start at 3. We used to start at 5. But now have you seen this magazine?
Not that one. I mean, that magazine, yes. National Geographic.
But have you seen this issue, April 2018?
No.
These 2 girls are twins.
They do look. Their faces are almost identical.
They're twins.
Actually, they are identical.
They're twins.
Yeah.
Different color, but they're twins. And you look in this magazine, this is just a delightful magazine. I ordered 20 copies, but I came out here after I ordered it. I don't know whether I got them or not. But I hope they came because I would like to make these available to lots and lots of people. That's not the one. You have to see, there's a page in here. Oh, where is it? I'll find it. Let's take a little minute. Because I should have this marked, but there's no sense in getting efficient at my age. Way too late. I hope I didn't. I'll bet I tore it out. I have it in the other room. All right, I'll get the other one.
Sure.
Look at that. Shows the journey from where we started in Africa to where they moved. Those brilliant black males and females moved from below the equator to populate every landmass on the face of the earth. And they did that moving and that traveling without any modern technology. People that call themselves Native Americans came from the same place that all the rest of us did. So when you talk, it's just the whole thing is so, here's all this brilliance and creativity and courage and skill, and we have, for the last 300 years in this country, accused blacks of being ignorant and uneducated and slovenly, and we say ugly, ugly things about them. And yet, look what they accomplished.
Yeah, it's very strange to me how that happened, and why did the darker skinned individuals, why did they allow that to happen, or could they allow?
What do you mean they didn't allow it to happen? The only reason there are white people is because some of those black people, as their skin, their hair, and their eyes were very, very dark because they were exposed to a lot of sunlight, so their bodies produced a lot of melanin. As they moved farther from the equator and they're exposed to less and less sunlight, their bodies, their skin, their hair, and their eyes got lighter. But their brains didn't get smaller. So that all of us who think we should have done something about this, we were it.
But how did the white man take control of the situation? Why do we think that we're superior all these years? Why was there slavery? That's what I'm wondering about.
Read the book, Anthony Browder's book, Nile Valley Contributions to Civilization. And you'll read that 4,000 years before the birth of Jesus Christ, people here were doing cataract surgery with metal instruments before there was any such thing heard of in Europe or in what is now the UK. What happened is what happens when people get power. Read Naomi Wolf's book. I can't remember the name of it. 10,000 years ago, men and women had equal power. And then as a result of more strength in the male group, they took over. Well, now we realize that men don't live as long as women do because men aren't as strong as women are. So now women are starting to take over. You're going to watch this thing, and within 30 years, according to the demographics of this country, within 30 years, white people will have become a numerical minority in the United States of America. white people are scared. And when I go on a college campus, invariably, somebody will say, well, what are we going to do? When they get power, some white female, when they get power, aren't they going to want to treat us the way we've treated them? And I say to the group, well, every person in this room who considers himself or herself a member of the black race, who wants to get even with all white folks, please stand. 2 or 3 black males will stand, the rest of them go, and whites look, I say, see, they don't want to get even with all of us. Don't worry about that anymore. But now let's be honest about citizens. We say American citizens. Mm-hmm. And we have a so-called president right now who wants to put a wall on the southern border of the United States to keep people who are Americans out of America. Think about this. This tickles me to death. From the northernmost point of Canada to the southernmost point of South America, all the people in here are Americans. North Americans, Central Americans, South Americans. These are all Americans. You can't put up a wall to keep Americans out because we're all Americans. Think about that the next time he opens his mouth. Think about how ignorant that man is, and think about the day he said to the governor of Puerto Rico, I've talked to your president. And she said to him, you are our president. Did that not frighten you?
Nothing frightens me anymore.
Oh, it does me. It does me. I'm old enough to know when it's time to be scared. Yeah, if you aren't frightened, you won't try to change the situation. We have to convince people that what is coming could be the end of democracy in the United States of America.
What do you think is coming?
I think if we do not get this man out of office, that this country will become an oligarchy, that it will be ruled openly, by only people with money. It won't become a kingdom.
I feel like it's always been like that, though.
No, I don't think, no. You have never seen it as bad as it is right now.
Okay.
Right now is the worst shape as far as I'm concerned. Even during the Depression, it wasn't as bad as it is now. Because we're doing things deliberately to see to it that a certain group of people maintain power. And the man who calls himself the president right now is a dupe. People like the Koch brothers are using him. He thinks he's using them. He's wrong. They're using him.
But don't you feel the same about the Democratic Party? So I feel like both sides are kind of to blame. I don't like the Democratic Party for certain reasons. I don't like the Republican Party for some reasons. Do you feel the same, or are you okay with how the Democrats have ran things?
I think that we were in better shape under Barack Obama than we are now. We had better hope for the environment. We knew climate change was coming, but we thought maybe we could alter our behaviors in such a way that it wouldn't be as drastic as it's going to be. We were thinking more about, in an empathetic way. People of color don't want our sympathy. They want our empathy. They want us to walk in their shoes for a while. White folks are afraid we're going to have to. They'll do whatever they can to keep white people on top. Well, if what you're on top of is a dung heap, that's not great. We had something better going for us until this man got into power. And now, white women can go Me Too all they want to. What they had better be saying is all of us. Because it isn't only white women who get raped and savaged. And it isn't only white women who are being mistreated. And we need to remember that the civil rights movement was making good progress. And then white males decided they had to find a way to slow it down. So they permitted the women's movement to take place. If you think the women's movement was anything but an attempt by white males to slow down the progress of the civil rights movement, you're grossly mistaken. And it did exactly what they wanted it to do. And white women allowed themselves to be used. And they're still doing it because they want to be appreciated by a powerful white male.
Very true.
Well, I think it is. Take a look at what's going on. Take a look at what has happened.
Right.
And Bernie baby only talks about the civil rights movement when he shows himself marching, I think maybe on the Pettus Bridge, I'm not sure, but he marched with some civil rights people during the civil rights movement. After that, he has no, it seems to me, no concern for those who are other than white. I do not see him. And I've been in his presence several times, and at no time have I felt that he has an overwhelming urge to make things better for people who are other than white males.
I get that feeling too. I've been in his presence too, and I get that feeling.
Yeah,
I don't know him.
Thank you.
But
Thank you. I'm glad you do.
Yeah.
I keep thinking, Jane, it's your imagination.
Yeah.
Jane, you're being overly critical. And then I watch him and I listen to him, and I saw the way he treated my daughter when he found out that she had been married to a Saudi Arabian. She was one of his major supporters, in our community, and she said something about her Saudi Arabian grandchildren, and his face went cold. He whipped around and walked away just as fast as he could.
Yeah. He likes to walk a lot to places instead of taking a cab or, take ride services, whatever. But he only walks like 50 feet and then he gets in a car.
Of course he does. He's pretending poverty. He's pretending poverty. I can show you poverty.
Like I had a friend actually videotape him in DC. And it was hilarious.
Yeah, he is just pretending poverty.
Yeah.
He is, and somebody should let him have some.
Yeah, have him.
Hey, Bernie, you want to go back to what it was?
Left.
A black father?
It's a black father. And I asked him, how do you feel about that? And why is it so prevalent, within your community? And he just said, the black family is just in trouble. It's falling apart, and it has been for a long time. He didn't have an answer for it.
Wait a minute.
That's what he said. Yeah.
The black family is falling apart because of racism in this country.
Right, but he blamed it on the black people.
Well, stop blaming it on the black people because they don't have the power to make this thing. They don't have the power to write these laws.
Right.
And these laws guarantee that black men won't make money and that they won't live to be very old. He needs to educate himself. He needs to read the new Jim Crow, and he needs to read it now and stop blaming black people. He needs to realize, I did a speech in Washington, D.C. at a school, elementary school, last spring. And then the parents came in. I worked with children in the daytime, and the parents came in the evening. And I did a 3-hour thing, because what I do. And they brought in a black woman in a wheelchair and put her at the end of the front row. And when I was done speaking, somebody came up and said, "So-and-so wants to see you." I said, "Where is she?" She's right down there. And they pointed at this black woman sitting at the end of the row. And I went down and I said, "What can I do for you?" And she started to cry. And she said, "I've waited 80 years to hear somebody say what you said on that stage tonight. To hear somebody say that blacks were here first, that blacks had the skill, the talent, the ability, the courage, the audacity to populate every landmass on the face of the earth, and that every person in that room was a 30th to 50th cousin of everybody else, and we all came from black great grandparents." Nobody had ever said that to her. And nobody has ever said to this young man about black families, nobody has ever said to him, "We've got it set up, my friend, so that black males are not going to be successful. You need to realize that you're being had on a daily basis. We have fixed it. We fixed it with slavery. We didn't take the dumb, the ignorant, the weak, the sick out of Africa and bring them to England to sell them to this country as slaves. We took the best and the brightest, and we brought them here and then told them they were the worst and the least and turned them into slaves. Well, we enslaved their bodies, but we didn't enslave their minds. And some of them have allowed themselves to have their minds enslaved, but some of them, like ever so many people now that you see on television, who are black and beautiful, women and men who have refused to be enslaved for the rest of their lives. That is, if black people had ever been told the truth